हेलो हेलो, टेस्टिंग टेस्टिंग टेस्टिंग। तो ये हटा दूं ना पीछे से। एमपी वीर, हाउ आर यू? पहली बात हो थी। वीर जी कैसे हो? यू आर म्यूटेड।
Hello, sir. Good morning.
मॉर्निंग सर।
How are you?
चल कोई बात।
Can you hear me?
All right. So for this, we have a very good set of panelists, and we are very grateful to them for joining us today. We are going to start with. So for this, we have a very good set of panelists, and we are very grateful to them for joining us today.
What is it? This is your recording. Is it?
We are going to start with. So for this, we have a very good set of panelists, and we are very grateful to them for joining us today.
What is it? This is your recording. Is it?
We are going to.
Sorry for the usual technological blip.
Can someone guess what has happened? So I know what has happened, but you can repeat. The online streaming is on, and I am not able to stop the YouTube channel. Okay, so the YouTube and the other one are going together.
So that's okay. Then we can leave it. We use this mic.
Yes. So we have a very good set of panelists here. Of course, we are going to start with Mr. Benjamin Wong to welcome you all on behalf of PHDMW and Invest Hong Kong. Then we have our keynote speaker, Captain Wang JJ, Captain Wang Jianjun. Then Chirag Bahri I already introduced briefly. Then we have Mr. Ravjot Kumant. You can just stand up and say hello. So he will be there on the panel. Then Ms. Ruchi Bhave, she is there. Then Captain Vanderborn and Captain Girish Manjari. Yeah. Then the moderator is Mr. Krishnan Subramaniam. So I will talk a little bit more about Captain Subramaniam a bit later. So, okay, right now. So Krishnan is a seasoned professional. First of all, we are very delighted that he has come to Hong Kong. He is the International Vice Chairman of the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers. That's the global. All right. So each branch has got a chairman and vice chairman. So he is the international vice chairman. And after 2 years, he'll take over as chairman. 1 year. Next year he takes over as the chairman of the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers. First time an Asian is going to be chairman. Am I right in saying that? Fantastic. So shall we have a round of applause? So Krishnan is a seasoned professional in the areas of supply chain, logistics, commercial shipping, and related education. He is currently the strategic advisor for Transworld Group, UAE, India. We are based in UAE as well as India and deal with tankers and liquid cargo logistics. He is the international vice chairman of the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers and heads the global digitalization project. So that's a big project we have taken on. He might tell you a bit later more about it. And that's including the everything online, when the exams and markings and everything would be done. He's a trainer for ICS, Blue Ocean Corporation, MERS Training, Dubai Shipping Agents Association, and Bahrain Ship Agents Association. He has equal experience in academics as an academic advisor at maritime institutions and adjunct faculty at SP Jain School of Global Management and UPES Dehradun, India. He will be our moderator. He will be moderating the panel after the presentations are given by the speakers. Welcome address would be given by Mr. Benjamin Wong. Ben, I'm sorry, I have not put too long of your, everybody knows you. You're like the sun who rises in the sky and the rays touch everyone. Can we have a round of applause for that? So Benjamin Wong is the head of maritime cluster at Invest Hong Kong, the Hong Kong SAR government. Department responsible for attracting and facilitating foreign direct investment. He has a maritime cluster portfolio covering ship owning, ship management, ship financing and leasing, marine insurance, maritime law and arbitration, marine technology and shipbuilding, etc. There is a long list. There are further things that he does, especially in terms of attracting the investments and growing investment into Hong Kong. Then our keynote speaker is Captain Wang Jianjun. Captain Wang Jianjun, with over 10 years of experience working on vessels, including bulk carriers, container vessels, and oil tanker, joined the Marine Department as Marine Officer in 2012. He is now serving for the Transport and Logistics Bureau and is mainly responsible for policy matters relating to merchant shipping, manpower training initiatives for the maritime sectors, and secretariat support for the Manpower Development Committee of the Hong Kong Maritime and Port Board. So that also includes the Maritime and Aviation Training Fund. So when students, they do, let's say they do ICS exams or enroll for it or do Skills Plus exams or the courses, if they are eligible, very simple requirements for eligibility. It's nothing complicated. You need to have a Hong Kong ID card and you need to be capable of working in a maritime organization and you should not have exceeded your limit. Yeah, 30,000 Hong Kong dollars, that's the limit. As well as you got to be sure that you do not delay application for the refund. Not something you did last year and you asked for it today. That doesn't work. He has been paying attention to the development of contemporary seafarers, especially their physical and mental health. So I'm so delighted, sir, you're here. So without further ado, can I ask Ben to give the welcome for 5 minutes, and after that, welcome Mr. Wang to the stage.
Thank you, Granite. I'm the son of my parents. I'm the sun coming out from the sky. Now it's fantastic to be here today. Actually, during the pandemic time, I think for those who were actually participating actively in maritime conferences, seminars, seafarer was a very popular topic during the time. However, now actually we see less, but then actually it doesn't mean that the importance actually drops and is smaller. Rather, actually, it's getting more and more important because of the change of technology and the need to rescale and also upscale them. Now, a pop quiz. Norway, do you know when did it separate from the union with Sweden? Anyone? Make a guess. No prize. 1905. Then when did they set up their consulate general here in Hong Kong? The year after. So it's right the year after that they set it up. But the reason why actually is one of the reasons is because of the seafarers. A lot of them are visiting Asia and stopping here in Hong Kong. That's why. So yeah, so actually it's a little bit of information I gathered last night when I was 17 with the ambassador from Beijing. So actually it shows you how important the seafarer to Norway and also to Hong Kong. Now the seafarer career actually has been, I think, underrated by a lot of general citizens who doesn't know the industry. I know this seafarer's wife. She simply doesn't allow her husband to talk about the sea career in front of the kids. Simply, you'll get mad. And I think actually, there are many different reasons, right? But then I think nowadays it's actually very different from before. The legacy actually is getting much, well, it's still tough, but comparing to before, it's easier. Now, for example, a lot of people here are seafarers. And I think seafarer, the career actually builds character and also leadership. Anyone disagree? Right. Yeah, it's very true. Actually, I also heard a comment from my ex-colleague. He said he was in this dragon boat training. And he said one dragon boat, 20 people, it's the industry event, right? So all seafarers, 20 captains. Everybody wants to make a shot, make a call. So I think this is how it builds the leadership, yes, you don't need to have 20 captains in a 20 crew boats, but still, that is what leadership is about. You try to lead the group and make the call. So this is the thing that I think is what the career will bring. And also now I mentioned about the life at sea. Now, actually, I think some of you know, and some ships nowadays, actually, they've got this low Earth orbiting satellite network connected so that they are having easier access to Wi-Fi. Now, that's very important, especially to the mental welfare, wellness of the crew, because getting connected with the family is very important. So I think these are actually what technology is bringing to help with the life at sea, to make it not as tough as before. Yet at the same time, life at sea actually provides you with a very good career opportunities, right? If you want, you can come on shore. All of you are here on shore now, very successful career. And I think partially because of the skill and also character that you have acquired at sea. Now the government has been trying to do a lot of different things to support the seafarer. For example, we have this 6,000 Hong Kong dollars subsidy for cadets. They're going through the training, a monthly subsidy. And also we have this Maritime and Aviation Training Fund, which is meant to support no matter it's company hiring interns, is a subsidy, or to subsidize on-job professionals to get courses. So this is what we are doing. And of course, ESG, sustainability, well-being of seafarer at sea, all these are actually being encouraged by the company, by the Hong Kong government, because this actually is something that I think I mentioned earlier. The reskilling, upskilling of the seafarers is very important. So without further ado, I'll pass it back to the speaker, Wong, for the keynote speaker.
Can I suggest you stand here and so that people online also. Okay.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm glad to meet all of you at this seminar. The theme of this year's Hong Kong Maritime Week is Navigation to a Greener Future. This highlights Hong Kong government the strong commitment to sustainability. When we talk about sustainability, we just focus on the environmental protection and reducing carbon emission. We also considering the well-being of the people who are vital to the industry, our seafarer and maritime professional. As a seaman with 10 years working experience at sea, I fully appreciate the pressure on seafarer. Long way from home, living seafarer feel disconnected with the family and friends. Technology and internet development could help bridge the communication gap, but cannot replace the physical interaction and sharing with the family or friends. The feeling of the isolation is inevitably generated. This isolation is a significant factor affecting the mental well-being and contribution to the loneliness, depression, and homesickness. These challenges are further compounded by the need for continuous professional development, especially for the younger seafarers who have to prepare the exams and the certification. while still performing duty at sea. A working force that is mentally resilient is of paramount importance for maintaining safe and efficient operation at sea. Seafarers who suffer from the stress, anxiety, or depression are not only risking themselves, their mental health challenge can also have broader implications over the safety of the other crew on board, the environmental and the global supply chain. In fact, the study has shown that the mental health issue in maritime industry can increase the likelihood of the accident on board, reduce the work productivity, and having turnover rate. Mental health issues are also faced by those working ashore in the maritime industry. Professionals working in maritime services such as a ship broker, marine insurance broker, shipping manager, maritime lawyer are often working under immense pressure as well. The fast-paced nature of the shipping schedule, long working hours, and the need to constantly adapt to the change in the global trade can lead to stress and anxiety. When we discuss the sustainability, it's important to recognize that the mental health and well-being of the all maritime professionals, whether on board or ashore, are integral to the long-term success of the maritime sector. The Hong Kong government is deeply committed to addressing this challenge. In fact, wellness scheme and the Maritime and Aviation Training Fund are providing support to alleviate the financial concern of the potential seafarers. The seagoing training incentive scheme provides a subsidy to the cadet for pursuing their career in the maritime field. As one may be aware, cost of living may be hard to overcome when a cadet wishes to pursue their career in the maritime field and the current salary level. With a will to attract more Hong Kong people to join the maritime industry while relieving their financial concern, this scheme provides financial support to Hong Kong seafarers by offering a monthly subsidy 10,000 Hong Kong dollar during the cadetship and additional financial assistance when they are preparing for examination ashore as well when attaining higher certifications. The professional training and examination refund scheme provided 80% refund are fees for pre-approved course and examination for participation. The scheme provides financial support to the in-service practitioners, allowing them to focus on the professional development while alleviate part of the stress arising from the concern over the cost of living, thereby contributing to better mental health. Besides, by encouraging continual learning and upskilling, the scheme also helped maritime practitioners build confidence and resilience, which they are key to manage the pressure of the job, whether on board or ashore. We should be mindful that financial support is only part of the solution. To truly address the mental health challenge, we must continue to explore the way to raise the awareness, improve self-resilience, and access to mental health resources. While there's a growing recognition of the importance of mental well-being in the maritime industry, more can be done to ensure that safe and shore-based workers have more access to the support they need, such as counseling, service, helplines, and peer support network. We will continue to collaborate with the stakeholders in the industry and explore with them how can we better integrate mental health consideration into the broader framework of the workforce development. As we navigate toward a green future, we must remember that sustainability is more than just on technology and the environmental goal, but most importantly on people. A healthy and mentally resilient workforce is essential to the industry's long-term sustainability and success. I'm confident that this forum will be a valuable platform for insightful discussion, invaluable exchange, and fruitful collaboration. Together, let's shape a better future for all those who serve in our maritime community. May I wish you have a fruitful and inspiring discussion. Thank you very much.
Very good morning, everyone. First of all, very pleased to hear the welcome note from Mr. Ben as well as the keynote speech from Mr. Wong. Thank you very much for enlightening us and all the sharing your initiatives that the Hong Kong government has been taking towards the welfare and well-being of seafarers. I could not agree more that we need to do more in collaborations. A lot of efforts have been put up by various stakeholders. Some of them are sitting here, some of them are not here, but across the globe, a lot of initiatives have been taken, and we are here to just reflect back on that, how we can move these things further. So I'm also very delighted to be part of this session and extremely thankful to the co-organizers for inviting us to be here. So thank you very much for having us here. So let me now start a little bit about our organization, what we are doing a little bit in my presentation. I'm not going to do a more presentation, but I'll be just talking about it so that you can understand a bit more about what the efforts have been taken up by the organization in collaboration with various partners. And we can also discuss more things about how different trends and themes which are going on around the seafarers' welfare issues are prevalent at the moment. What actions that we need to take, and I'm sure today's panel and esteemed panelists who are going to be joining us very soon will be able to then reflect back more into deeper that what steps needs to be taken. That's okay. Okay. Do I need to go back? So ICE1 is a seafarers welfare organization. It's based in UK, headquarters in UK. And we are looking after seafarers welfare issues worldwide. It's a membership organization. So a lot of people, a lot of shipping companies who are sitting here as well, and they are members of ICE1. And we are not just the shipping companies who are members of ICE1. It's also the worldwide people, organizations who are keen interest in the welfare of seafarers, including some of the ship suppliers, including the P&I clubs, including the associations and the ICS, ITF, and ICMA being one of them, that they are members. So we are a membership organization which tries to include the people or organizations who have keen interest in the seafarers' welfare to come together, share the best practices which are going on around the world around the mental health and well-being, and how we can dissipate, how other companies can learn from each other to take some of that initiatives in their policies as well. So that's something which I'm very confident that each one of us can learn from each other and collaborate further to make it. Now to come back on what we actually do. So as a charity organization, we run health programs on health and well-being for the seafarers and their families. Whenever I'm mentioning about seafarers, their families are always included because we feel the seafarers are at sea for their families. That's the number one priority for them. So looking after their families is also extremely important. And what Mr. Ben also just mentioned in his address, I think that really hits the nail over there. Now, what we are trying to do is that on one side, we are trying to help the seafarers with the 24/7, 365 days a year, free of cost helpline for the seafarers. Because on the helpline, we are getting a number of calls from the seafarers and their families, sharing their different kind of issues which are going on. It's not just the emotional, the mental health support, but it is also the day-to-day routine that the seafarers are going to. Suppose they are in port of Hong Kong, for example, we get normally calls that, okay, I'm in this particular port, Are there any seafarer centers here? Are there anyone whom I can support so that I can get a shore leave? Simple thing, or how I can go out of that. Other things could be the information seeking, other information that they would need, or maybe the financial distress that the seafarers or their families are going through in their difficult times. How can I get more financial support from somewhere? It can be the cases of abandonment, unfortunately, the Red Sea issues which are going on, or any of the piracy cases, or any other prevalent crisis that the seafarers or the families are going through. And our helpline team provides a listening ear to the seafarers and the family. So that's the number one thing I think which we need to take is that seafarers need a listening ear. They need somebody that somebody can listen to them in their difficult times. That's if we are able to provide that platform, then I think most of the half of the problem will get resolved over there itself. Because sometimes what happens, the seafarers, when they are on board ship, they find it extremely tough to share their feelings and thoughts with their fellow colleagues. With the advancement of technology, with the advancement of internet, things have become easier as well to stay connected with your loved ones. But at the same time, it has also reflected back on various challenges, because now different nationality crew are coming in. There is a less manning, which is happening in the, is already there. We are struggling with the less manning issues as well. And because of different nationalities, they have different ideas, different religions, different diverse background, different food habits. How can the seafarers can really share their feelings with somebody else on board? And that's the number one challenge that we also see with the seafarers. They don't open up. Seafarers are confined in their cabins after their work. That's the reports that we have been hearing from different kind of, publications or different kind of research work which is going on. Seafarers do not interact at all with fellow colleagues. They just want to go back to the cabins and maybe use the internet for connecting with their families, or maybe going live or chatting or whatever they want to do with that. It's important for that, no doubt in that. It's important to stay connected with their loved one. But then how can we help our seafarers to also understand to balance their life? That is where we have taken some of the initiatives around going out and reaching out to the seafarers in the maritime colleges across the globe, so that we can try and make them understand about how they can look after their health and well-being before joining their first ship on board. And with that, we have taken a project called Seafarers Education and Awareness Sessions. And we have been reaching out to about 7 to 8 countries now. We are having these presentations in different maritime colleges, and we would like to expand more and more about it. How they can understand that we can cope up on board, understanding that there are challenges. Challenges it's our life. The challenges will keep coming on our day-to-day basis. But then how we can understand our coping skills, or how we can develop those skills within ourselves. That skills is a very key word that we need to understand, that how our seafarers are getting updated on their skills on an everyday basis. There are a number of things that we can help them, especially around the leadership. I think Mr. Ben also mentioned, and Mr. Wong also mentioned about the leadership skills of the seafarers. I think that's very important, that how we can inculcate those leadership skills. Some of the researches that we have done, including the Social Interaction Matters project, where some of the shipping companies also participated in that project, highlighted the key need that the seafarers, how we can, need to have a proper leadership skills in that. It's not that only the leader of the ship, that means the master or chief engineer needs to have that leadership skill. Every seafarer should develop those skills, because they need to support each other in the difficult times, and also in other ways. We did a research work just now, and I think some of the leaflets are also here about the decarbonization and impact of decarbonization on welfare of seafarers. But that also highlighted the need that, yes, the seafarers are very much agreeing to be part of the shift towards greener energies. And that's what the theme of this Hong Kong Maritime Week is. Seafarers are very much there, but are we taking them along with us? The question is, are the seafarers happy to be part of this entire transition, which is happening so rapidly, so fast? That's where the report highlighted the need to do more for the seafarers' well-being in that states. The seafarers mentioned about the extra workload, fatigue, techno-stress and techno-fatigues, which are coming up on the seafarers. How we can work with that, on that. And not only just the seafarers, it's also the shore staff who are struggling to find newer fuels. Seafarers are the shore staff are struggling to find the bunkers or the compliance issues which are there. Please stop. So the compliance issues which are also coming up about it, that how we can really ensure that the seafarers do not face any criminalization charges. Some of the comments from the seafarers were like, I'm facing issues with like, I feel like I'm been made a pawn into entire this thing, because they are feeling that the safety issues are been compromised. All the experiments are happening on ships. So those are the key things that I think we as a fraternity, we need to come together and try to address that, how we can work in bringing out solutions that are that can take along the seafarers and also address the psychological well-being and psychological safety of the seafarers. The other issues that we have been facing, the reportings have been coming around, is on the bullying, harassment. Not just the female seafarers, unfortunately, it's also the males also reporting about the bullying, harassment issues. And that has been on the rise in the last couple of years. And it has been an issue that has been going around in the maritime industry from quite some time. A lot of guidance and a lot of trainings have been done around it. I can see that there are gender diversity courses been run around. There are other stuffs been run around by companies themselves. There also, the Indian government has made it mandatory for every seafarer to undergo the gender diversity course. So I think with a diverse crew coming on board, how can we ensure that our seafarers are all inclusive, irrespective of their genders, irrespective of their backgrounds or the thoughts and all? With that in mind, we also launched a campaign couple of months back on how we can improve the allyship between men and women seafarers. So that campaign is also picking up quite a good pace around it, that the men and women, both seafarers, needs to an ally on board, or any other genders, not just the men and women, but any gender needs, or everybody has to work together to achieve that common goal. And by addressing all these challenges, we can try to improve the efficiencies of the seafarers. It's important to look back at what is making them feel more stressed on board nowadays, because every day the new regulations are coming up. Sorry, they say that, but yes, we can't stop those things, isn't it? There are issues with the geopolitical concerns. We can't stop that as well. As a community, a lot of efforts have been taken. Red Sea, Somali piracy in the past has thrown so many challenges for the seafarers and their families. We were talking to seafarers who were actually attacked by the pirates, and unfortunately, the citadel was not prepared fully. They all went into the citadel, which is good news. Nobody was harmed. Pirates were not able to capture them. But when they came out from the citadel, they shared the horrific stories about it. That was 16 to 17 hours they were in the citadel, and without food and water. It was not prepared well. So those kind of things, I think we as an industry, as a fraternity, we have to really keep on emphasizing to our seafarers to not be complacent in any of these things. The crisis can happen at any given time. Any time it can happen. We need to get prepared to address those crisis period as well at all given times. And that's where, again, I will reflect back on the leadership skills of the seafarers that needs to be emphasized on various accounts. In our work, we also see a lot of issues coming up with the family seafarers relationship issues. Unfortunately, because of the long distance relationships, and because shipping, to be hard fact, shipping is not a very attractive career anymore. I've been very factual on that. Are we getting the right talent, first of all, and are we able to retain them? And these family seafarer relationships are also rising. And then if the families are not content with the job of the seafarers at sea, will we be able to retain the seafarers for a longer period of time at sea? That's the question that we need to really think of it, that how we can also do more and more stuff for our families. I know a lot of companies are doing excellent stuff, but as a whole, I'm just flagging this off that we have to come together to address some of the issues that the families also needs to understand. Understanding the life of seafarers at sea, which I think Ben has also just mentioned about it. Exactly, that's the same thing that we are highlighting in our, how many seafarers, even forgetting about not the children, families do not share with them. Does the seafarer share everything with their families? I'm a former seafarer. I have never shared entire of my experience with my family, to be honest. Even not, as you know, that I was also in captivity in Somalia for 8 months. I have not even today have shared my entire day-to-day of things that I've suffered in the captivity with my immediate family members even. Because I fear that they might get more upset and stressed. And this is how the seafarers go through, that they don't share everything with their family. Then the families always sometimes look at as a very lucrative career, or they are all enjoying, or they're only the rosy picture they always share. But it's the time that the families also needs to be the back support of the seafarers in the entire episode. How can they take care of themselves? How can they take care of their obviously dependents? How we can empower them? How we can reach out to the families to maybe understand these perspectives as well. I think this is something which we all have to really look into. This will also help because of the technological advancement again. The problems which are all the problems which are landing on ships might, not happen that ways, and maybe the seafarers are more able to perform better, efficiencies and safeties will be better. So in that context also, I think it's important that we work with the families. COVID, we all know what the COVID has done for us all. It has one good thing it has done is that we are all talking about mental health and well-being. It's not just the seafarers, it's also ourselves. We all are talking about ourselves also, that am I okay? Do I need any support? So people are realizing that, and that stigma is still there in many of the countries. We need to understand that the seafarers come from diverse background. The stigma is still there. It is there in many of the regions. People shy to talk about it. People feel that we are mad if you're going to talk about our mental health and well-being. But we need to continuously make those efforts to ensure that our seafarers need to be the champion of mental health and well-being on board. They can create environment on board that can help them to look at. So I think with that, I think I would just like to mention one more thing about the port things as well, because that is also very close to me, and I keep hearing from seafarers about how we can work with the ports, that they can understand that seafarers are just not visiting them as taking their cargoes and going off. Seafarers need some time to regenerate. Seafarers need some time to get off from the port, to refresh themselves and to refresh their relationship with their fellow colleagues. It's difficult. It's getting extremely tough and difficult for the seafarers to keep on continuing in their contracts for months and months together without any kind of a break. What I will say, what we all have done is we have also put a ban on the alcohol. I know we can have debate on that for long and long, but imagine that we are trying to put a ban on that, and then what is happening? It's again impacting their attractiveness towards the shipping area. This is my personal view, not Iceland's view altogether. So it can be different. Everybody sits there, has a different view, but I feel let the people have whatever they want to do, but in a controlled manner. Obviously, it's important to look after the safety as well at sea. But then it has to be somewhere they get the freedom, they get the choice of what they want to go ahead. And it should not be complete blanket ban on things which is a way for people to come together and talk about anything. So I think that's something which we as an industry also needs to reflect back. And I'm sure our panel today will think about it as well, because when the seafarers are coming in the ports, are there enough provisions for them across the globe, not just Hong Kong? I know it's a lot of things are good here, but across the globe, if I say, are there enough mechanisms in place for the seafarers to safeguard them? Okay. So with that, I think I will just wind up my presentation or my speech here. And I again thank the organizers, and I really look forward to collaborate, work closely with each one of you in coming years and decades, so that we can keep on improving our seafarers, life on board and ashore as well, and also their families. So thank you very much for having us here. With that, I would like to now hand over the mic to Mr. Chris. If you can please come here. And I think he's been already introduced, so I don't need to reintroduce, but I think, yeah. Yeah.
Can we have them photograph it? Thank you, sir.
Very good morning to all of you. Mr. Wang and Mr. Wong had to leave a bit early, but really inspiring to listen to them, especially on what the steps which have been taken and continuing to be taken by the Hong Kong government in terms of supporting the maritime fraternity and education in particular. I keep hearing from the branch, Captain Verma and Jagmeet here in terms of the extent of support which is being given by the government to promote education and professionalism. So, Captain Verma, Mr. Jagmeet, who has been the kingpin of organizing these events and all the events which happen in Hong Kong, I believe. That's what I've been told, right? You are behind all of them in one way or the other. And Mr. Chirag from ICE1, all the committee members of ICS, ICE1, Global MET, who have come together to bring this very pertinent topic for discussion today. And all other professionals from the maritime industry, very good morning to all of you. Many thanks to all of you and especially the ICS Hong Kong branch for having me in Hong Kong. I'm visiting here after almost 12 years and glad to be here. I've been part of this week's Maritime Week events and it's really been impressive. I live in Dubai. I've been there for the last 28 years, barring 3 years in Singapore in between. But this has been really, really impressive in terms of what I've seen right from Monday morning and what's happening. Yes, Dubai also has been doing events, but a big round of applause to the community here, and I really enjoyed what I've seen, what I've heard. The other the very positive thing which as a learning I'm carrying back is the much needed collaboration between the various industry bodies and the government bodies, which is unparalleled what I'm seeing here. So it's very evident in this vibrant maritime city with such events being done jointly like this one today, which addresses the needs of all the stakeholders in the industry. So that's another one. Of course, Hong Kong maritime industry is a very mature industry, a mature market as compared to other cities. And that's very evident in the way it functions. So I've been here a couple of times. As I mentioned, I was in Singapore for a couple of years when I was with Shell Petroleum and later with the IMC group, but that was quite some time back, right? And today's topic, as the title aptly says, the aspect of mental well-being has to be addressed holistically, not only for those on board as well as it is also for those ashore, which Chirag also elaborated on that. And this has been recognized by all as a very critical element to be discussed and solutions provided, more so for those involved in physical operations and of course on board ships, where the challenges are complex and compounded with varying expectations and increasing expectations on them. This is a topic of importance in every company's business, and it is at the forefront in industry events. Last Friday, I was at the Maritime Ashore conference in Mumbai, where this topic was discussed by an esteemed panel comprising practitioners from around the world. And more so, since the related issues, whether on board or ashore, is impacting the performance of companies. Hence, addressing these issues is no longer optional. In the past, I have seen surge in discussions and sharing of information and best practices related to safety. And I can see a similar trend in two topics in today's context. One is about green initiatives, about emissions, and the second one is about mental well-being. I'm not a seafarer, but my experience on this particular topic was right from my early days when I was with Bharat Petroleum in Kandla, that I was there for 8 years as a boarding officer on tankers, interacting with the ship's officers and crew. And we were trained on the ways of working on board. Those were the days when, forget about mobile phones, we didn't even have a VHF handset to communicate. And I remember the first thing which happens when the ship is, once the gangway is down, is that we had the telephone department guy waiting with the telephone and the long wire to put a connection on board. Of course, it was primarily meant for ship-shore communication during discharge of cargo. But the first thing which used to happen is that, and we used to get irritated at that time, is a long queue of seafarers there wanting to just make that one single call. And then our seniors used to tell them that please allow them to do that, while we are busy doing the allaying and calculation, etc. Let them utilize the phone, for that single piece of communication which they wanted. And of course, currently through the ICS, we are involved in terms of the professional programs, and more so, and I'm involved with a couple of institutes where there is much more emphasis which is being given on the ship-to-shore transition. So career ashore, the guidance which needs to be given also is extremely important. So currently, yes, we continue to mentor and guide potential candidates on career opportunities ashore through the programs of the ICS. And I believe that in today's world, where the average sailing period has dropped to less than 10 years, this I picked up from one of the studies recently, the anxiety of a career after sea looms in the mind of those sailing as well, which needs to be addressed equally. We have a diverse panel experts today who will bring together various facets of this topic and focusing on solutions. We have an innovator destigmatizing the topic. We have an expert who has been delivering Medicare solutions to the maritime industry. We have a passionate professional who curates and delivers training programs needed for today's problems, and a master mariner who addresses these as part of his job responsibilities with the P&I Club. One of the other topics which I heard mentioned in many forums in the last couple of days, and even today, is training and right skilling. It's common knowledge that the lack of right information at the right time with the right person is much more, of a problem and dangerous. We shall hear more of this from our experts today. The first speaker of the day is the founder of Mind Talk, the Mind Talk, Hong Kong's premier mental health magazine, and is dedicated to destigmatizing conversation around mental well-being. With a master's degree in psychology, she is furthering her expertise by pursuing additional master's degrees in counseling and organizational psychotherapy. Her unique approach involves applying transactional analysis principles to individual development, leadership, and organizational structures. Her deep-rooted connection to the maritime industry since childhood provides her with a profound understanding of the emotional challenges faced by seafarers and shore-based personnel. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Ms. Ruchi Om. Thank you.
Mental well-being is a very important topic to me. It is so important that I went ahead and started a mental health magazine in Hong Kong when I was advised not to. Maritime industry is very important to me because I come from a family of deck officers and got married to a marine engineer. So for this very reason, I'm very grateful to ICS, Global Met, and ISWAN and Mr. Jagmeet Makkar for not only inviting me here to talk about this, but also giving mental well-being the stage that it needs. My presentation is going to be a short presentation, but I do hope that it's going to be a journey where you can reflect on who you are as a leader, as a person, and hopefully I can provide some value to that. I love this quote by Eric Berne, who is the founder of TA, where he says that the destiny of every human being is decided by his thoughts, emotions, and feelings, and how he transacts with the obstacles and challenges that happen around him. This is very important because it brings to our attention that every individual's experiences are subjective. But what it also says is that every individual has the power and the agency to act and react differently with the challenges in the environment around him. And taking this idea, I'm going to move forward into my presentation, which talks about mental well-being from an organizational perspective and from leadership and power. Once we understand that it is our destiny is really subjective to who we are as human beings, it is finally the view of the self, how we view ourselves is how our mental health will be. So our lived experiences and our environment and our transactions with those environment create a view of ourselves. Within me, if I feel that I matter, I have purpose, I have value, it will impact my mind, body, and soul, because mental health is that. It is the mind, body, and soul. If my view of the self is where I feel hopeless, I feel powerless, I think I do not have the power to make a change, my mental health will come across in that manner. And that brings us to this quote, which is really beautiful. And I'm going to apply this quote to seafarers. When seafarers as young cadets first join ship, it's a new birth for them. They are infants. They are princesses filled with potential, curiosity, and spontaneity. And then they are met with the environment and the civilizing process of the maritime industry that talks to them about the rules, regulations, what is required, what are the social norms, what is expected of them. And then the environment decides how they start viewing themselves. And the idea behind calling them frogs is not basically calling them frogs, but basically saying their innate worth and their innate curiosity could be taken away from them depending on the environment that they are in. And that brings us to a very important concept called psychological contracts. Psychological contracts are unwritten set of rules and regulations that employers have from employees and employees have from the employers. For example, an organization might want an employee to come on time, work hard, be diligent, show loyalty to the company. And what the employee would want from the employer is, am I valued? What is my role within the company? Do I have the permission to make mistakes? When I make mistakes, am I given feedback or am I faced with criticism? Am I punished for making mistakes? Am I allowed to bring my whole self to work every single day? Or are only those parts of me welcome to work which the organization wants to see me? Am I creating value? Does the organization understand that work is not the end all and be all of me, and there is life, and I would like to strike a balance? And what it does, it creates trust and commitment with the organization, with the job at hand. And what organizations could do is regularly monitor these psychological contracts and adapt where necessary. This is another nice quote where everyone carries his parents inside of them. And with parents, we also mean authority figures, our bosses, our seniors, our line managers. As I mentioned, that when youth join the maritime industry, they are taking a new birth. Their seniors are their parents, and they are learning from them all the time. Not just those on board, but also those ashore. And they are learning and they are deciding how they are going to, what kind of leaders they are going to be in the future. And with this, I bring you to the concept of ego states. And the reason to bring this to your attention is organizations are not made of brick and mortar. Organizations are made of individuals. And I'll briefly introduce this concept. The PSE model is very unique to TA, and it's called the ego states. Ego means the self, and state is a state of mind. And all of us operate through these 3 ego states at any given time. Our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and emotions are our parental ego state, where we've learned how to behave, what to do, and we've learned that right from our parents, to our teachers, to other elders in our life, and finally our bosses and seniors. The child ego state is the thought, feelings, and behaviors that we learned in our childhood. It could be something that we carry from our actual childhood, or it could be something that we learned to act and behave in a manner when we first joined ship, because we realized when I do that, I can survive. When I do that, I have an opportunity to move forward. And finally is the adult ego state. That's where we want to be, where our thoughts, feelings, our behaviors are always present in the here and now. When I am transacting with you today, right now, am I present here, or am I basing this on one of my earlier speaking engagements where maybe I made mistakes and I was ridiculed and I come here with a lot of fear? Or do I give you the opportunity to receive me fully and allow me to make mistakes? And do I allow myself that permission to be here as a whole? And once we understand where we operate from, that impacts our leadership style. As a leader, we could be critical of our juniors, where we are bossy and we are arrogant and we are punitive of their mistakes. Or we are marshmallowing, we have absolutely no trust and we micromanage everything that they do. As a leader who believes that they have the power and who are willing to exert the power, that leader will always stay in the here and the now. They will always be present, reaching out to their structured parental state when needed, or nurture their juniors and their colleagues when needed. They will cooperate when asked to. They will be spontaneous and curious. And the idea is to create a balance in that what is needed during that time, what is the need of the hour. A leader who is willing to accept that they have the power to make the change, they are powerful enough, will be an effective leader, will be a psychologically effective leader, as compared to a leader who believes they have no power, who believes they are just one of the employees of the organization and they are helpless because they will demand power. And when they demand power, they might turn into bullies because they don't know how to be powerful. And that is why leadership is such an important aspect of mental health and well-being in an organizational setup. And that is why a holistic approach is needed to make mental well-being sustainable. There is a lot of work that Chirag just spoke about, which is done from the bottom up, giving a lot of support to those on board. But are we extending that support to those who are joining Ashore? Are organizations talking to them about the value that they bring to the organization as ship managers, as fleet managers? Are they given the freedom to learn, to make mistakes, and to grow? Are they given a mentor to help them through the initial journey of their new life as those working ashore? Are there resources of coaching and transformative practices available to them? And do organizations know what psychological contracts they are creating with their employees? Because leadership does not happen just on board. Leadership comes from top down. And with this, I hope I have given you enough food for thought, and it can be a reflective journey for you going forward. I would like to give credit to the research that I looked into before doing my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ruchi, for those insights. We will have the Q&A session at the end of all the presentations. There are two things which jumped to my mind. One was my own journey in the various organizations where I worked, and as I was reflecting on those. But talking about ship-to-shore transition, two things which immediately struck me is that one is, I was talking to a cousin of mine whom I met just last month at a wedding. And her husband was a seafarer as a chief engineer. And she was talking about, in a lighter vein, about the transition back when he retired at the age of 65. He decided to retire. So he was sailing for more than 40 years, 40 plus years. The extent of adjustment which the family had to do. That as much as, yes, they welcome him back in terms of, so I don't know whether we have structured programs for that. A company like Shell, where I worked for 14 years, I remember there were structured programs before retirement. 2 years before retirement, the company used to pay consultant for the transition for retirement, because from a full-time job, and many of them don't even know or don't have hobbies. So how to do that? So probably even not just in the office in terms of the transition, probably if there aren't programs, I think we should look at how to counsel the family as well in terms of welcoming them back for a smooth for the life. Our next speaker is a seasoned master mariner with over 42 years of experience across the shipping and the port industry. He has held senior management positions on both sides of the supply chain. He's a dedicated content creator, having produced over 100 micro-learning videos. Over the past 15 years, he has conducted audits and accident investigations on more than 200 ships. Today, drawing on his experience with system audit and investigations, he will discuss how the changes in the maritime industry over the last decade may have impacted the well-being of seafarers. Let's welcome Captain Girish Manjal to share his thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. I just put on the presentation. Oh. That's fine, then I won't change it to the presenter. It has to. Mhm. But can you put the presentation back? Let's see, let me change. No. We can go back to the presentation. We can switch this off. But this is what they will see, right? Okay, they will see that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Apologize for this. This is because since we're going online, I wasn't prepared for that. But nevertheless. Okay, so my name is Girish, and I'm going to be talking about the changing face of seafaring in relevance to the mental well-being of seafarers. And because I'm a filmmaker, I would like to start with a short story. And this story is about Thalassa. Oops. And because we are online, I'm going to read it from here since I don't have access. And this is in context of what we are going to be talking about. So Thalassa is the goddess of the sea. Long ago, there was a goddess named Thalassa who ruled the seas with wisdom and grace. Sailors prayed to her for safe passage, and she calmed even the fiercest of storms. But as the world changed, so did the sea. Sailors ventured further, but something began to change within them. Their faces, once filled with hope, grew weary. The storms outside were not their only challenge. Their inner storms of fatigue, fear, and isolation began to consume them. Concerned, Thalassa sought the counsel of the gods. How can I help them? She asked. Their minds are restless even when the seas are calm. The gods replied, the seas have changed Thalassa, and so must the sailors. They must learn to sail with both their hands and their hearts. Only when they will find peace. So Thalassa slowed the winds, giving sailors time to rest and reflect. She whispered guidance through waves, teaching them to care for their mental well-being just as they did with their bodies. Sailors who embraced this wisdom found peace within themselves, no longer battling the seas, but working in harmony with them. Now, let us transition to the present times from Thalassa and see what are some of the changes that are impacting the well-being of our seafarers. And this is a subject which I was very fortunate that Jagmeet handed over to me, where we could talk about the changes that have happened in the few decades that have impacted seafarers. And I'm going to be talking about just 3 practical issues which you would be familiar with. But however, I will highlight them and bring them to the forefront with some suggested. So this is the changing face of seafaring. And this is being created with artificial intelligence. So what has changed in the last few decades? The industry has seen profound change in terms of the regulations that have been introduced. We have the International Security Management, the Maritime Labour Convention that has been introduced, Ballast Water Convention, the energy efficiency that has been introduced over the years. Then we have measures to control air pollution.
We are changing over to dual fuel with the introduction of new fuels. Now, what does that happen? Every new regulation or convention that is introduced brings with it seafarers training, a compliance check, and a whole range of documentation which requires the time and attention of the seafarers. What is more interesting is, of course, as I said, this has been created by artificial intelligence. It also has the officer juggle multiple hats of responsibility, at times being safety officers, security officers, environmental compliance managers, and sometimes even psychological officers, all within the confines of the ship, leaving very little time for rest and recovery of mental wellness. On top of this pressure is the clash of operational demands. The schedules of the vessels are normally set by charterers and owners on the basis of the available port windows, which at times does not consider what would be the rest hours to meet up with these schedules. It is very difficult then for a seafarer to take the responsibility of a schedule and then match up with his rest hours, because he was not involved in forming those schedules. And this is a Google map, but the voyage is in true between these four ports. Reactively, if I try, I will not be able to match up. So only way I can match up is by being proactive when this is taken into consideration when port schedules are being formed. So that is a clash of operational demands which adds on to the mental well-being of a seafarer. This further gets more complex when the vessel arrives port. There are multiple stakeholders which attend to the vessel. But what is different? There were stakeholders earlier also which were wanting the time and attention of the crew when the ship reached port. Now, what is different is the short port stays because of the voyages that have become restricted. And in this short port stay, everybody needs the attention, starting from port state control officers, bunker surveyors, classification societies, ship chandlers. There are multiple stakeholders, everybody wanting the time and attention of the seafarer. And the seafarer has to give his time and attention, but at the cost of his mental well-being and compromising on rest hours. I did mention the story of Thalassa just basically to bring to the point that Thalassa did give them time to rest and reflect. What I'm trying to basically show over here in terms is that these three things are important. You have the regulations, they are just going to increase, nowhere to go. The port of calls, a vessel has to do them. Stakeholders in port, one has to attend to it. So then how do we reach a consensus? So let's just take a time to reflect. If we require and have to satisfy all these stakeholders, how do we do it? Because seafarers' well-being is as important. So here are two questions to consider. The first, are ships' safety management systems truly effective? That's a question for you to consider before I come to the suggested solution. And second, are ships adequately manned to support crew well-being? And before I go on to the solution, let me share with you an MSc recent release. This is MSc 109, published 23rd of September 2024. And the title is Study on the Effectiveness and Effective Implementation of the International Safety Management ISM Code. And I would draw your attention to section 5.4.6, which is to do with manning and fatigue. And I read from here
the minimum manning certificate issued by the flag state is a mistake of the industry. This certification only considers how to maneuver a vessel from one place to another without any consideration of cargo operations or ship's security requirement. And this is a malpractice of the flag state. This is being researched by all the stakeholders, not just one, and this document is available on IMO for you all to see. I continue, vessels are of the size that we have never seen before, and the manning is at a level that we have never seen before either, and that's a huge concern. It's also, to be honest, fatigue, and that comes back to manning. The crewing levels are so low, there's no time to do everything. So all that we basically discussed, what has changed in the last 10 years, now we have realized with all stakeholders coming together as to there is a genuine problem in the resources that we have on board versus the workload that has been put on the seafarers. And I'm sure going ahead, there will be changes made to the ISM system and we all will need to comply with that. Now let's look at the solutions which I'm suggesting with the questions that had been raised, all to do with the seafarers' well-being. The first suggested solution is what I term as effective manning, that is ship specific. Now, what do we mean by effective manning versus the minimum safe manning certificate of MLC is that the manning has to comply with the status of the vessel, status in terms of the ship's age, status in terms of the ship's trade, and status in terms of the operational demands of the vessel. So it's not as if a flag has to have this minimum and all vessels comply as per that. No, manning has to be ship specific. That's one. Second, we need an integrated system. And I put all the stakeholders together. And the other day when we were attending a forum, we mentioned about the collaboration between the stakeholders, which I call it as an integrated system, where the ship owner and charterers take responsibility of the schedule that they form to take into account the well-being of the seafarers. And even if it is required, it should be claused in the charter party that when port rotations are being scheduled, the seafarers' rest hours are accounted proactively and not reactively. Another part for the port operations, which I'm suggesting, is for the ship managers to take responsibility for coordinating the port stakeholders, whether it is in terms of the bunkering, the charter, the surveyors. Everything has to be coordinated by the ship's manager so that the well-being, both physical and mental, of the seafarer is taken into account. Also, what will be very important over here is for the terminals. We did mention that the terminals are now required, not just Hong Kong, but the other terminals, to permit shore leave. Post-COVID, a lot of private terminals around the world have stopped and still are continuing to stop shore leave. What we will need a coordination by the shipping lines with the terminals so that seafarers can go ashore and connect. This is a very, very important part. And I'm sure you all will be aware that some of the ports around the world even do not allow families to come on board if the ship is going to the home country, simply because of the port security requirements. So there is a lot of integration which is required between all stakeholders if we truly and genuinely want to consider the well-being of the seafarers as prime. So what do we need? And this is my, I'm coming to the final countdown. We need a new culture of mental wellness that is integrated within the larger and the broader spectrum of seafaring. We will need, as even Chirag mentioned, to break the stigma around mental wellness, which in some of the countries is still persistent. And that can happen through proper training of the seafarers. And I'm fortunate to say that digital platform such as ours, Marine Pals, is already doing that by ensuring that we have training resources which are readily available to the seafarers when they are out at sea. Also, what I could suggest is international organizations like Global Med should keep advocating both for effective manning and the collaboration of stakeholders. Finally, to conclude, seafarers, who are the vital part of the global supply chain, they truly deserve our respect. It's time we provide them with the tools and support which they require to succeed, not just at sea, but in life. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, Captain Girish, that was wonderful, especially the storytelling is an art, and that's what ultimately sticks into our minds, right? So I'm sure that the sea goddess Thalassa story would remain with all of us and then related to what's happening on board today. I relate also to one of the previous jobs I did when I was managing commercial for a chemical tanker company and talking to the chief officers and masters on board while I was doing cargo planning, that they used to hate sailing on chemical ships because multiple cargoes, 20 tanks, cleaning, 4 load ports, 8 cargoes, maybe 10 discharge ports, terminals, etc. And therefore the time which was required, and then on the ballast passage, it is about cleaning again and then backloading of CPP if it is there and then cleaning again. So the kind of pressure. So how do we relate cargo operation? Can we vary manning based on multiple cargo operations, which changes which multiple voyages or the routes which are when they're deployed or the contracts where they service? So it could be one of the aspects to consider, in the whole manning exercise. Our next speaker is a master mariner and sailed with Exmar NV Belgium on chemical product, LNG and LPG tankers. And since coming ashore in 2003, he has worked as a marine superintendent and as an independent marine surveyor. He joined the North Standard Club in Singapore in 2010 and currently heads the loss prevention for Asia Pacific. He's also heading the decarbonization as well as the people and well-being services offered by the club. He's a member of the Safe Navigation Working Group, part of the Singapore National Maritime Safety at Sea Council, which reviews the safe operation of the Port of Singapore, reporting to the Maritime Port Authority of Singapore. He's a fellow of the Nautical Institute, and following his tenure as the honorary president of the Nautical Institute Singapore branch between 2020 and 2024, he was appointed to the Nautical Institute's executive board. Let's welcome Captain Yves van der Baan. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Let me try that again. Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Lost my voice there somewhere, or maybe last night. I think what I thought was really interesting, I need to start using AI more to make pictures. Those are really, thought that was really, really good. Good. Already. Thank you. Okay, so a little bit on well-being from a P&I perspective and how we try and promote many of the concepts that were mentioned by the previous speakers already. But I want to start with this. This was a picture of a cabin on board the ship where the seafarer, I don't know what he did on the walls, but he jotted down a lot of his thoughts, which in the end culminated into him attacking the other seafarers on board. He made a small little crossbow out of pens. What happened here? Not sure, but what was certain is that nobody noticed it because of him being isolated in his cabin at all times. There was no cabin inspection that was done. The master never noticed anything being written on the wall. So how can we try and prevent these things from happening? Very quick look at our claims. About 30% of claims that we see from a PNI, and this will be similar for most of the PNI clubs, are related to the crew. So if you look purely at illness claims, bottom left by number, you can see it's about 20%, 19, 20%. By value, this will go up to 30%. Let's look in more detail at those illness claims though. Majority are at the areas that you can expect. There will be gastro-related, heart-related, vascular system-related, or infectious disease-related. This is excluding the COVID claims. But there is mental illness there for 3%. Does that sound correct? No, I see quite a few faces here. That's my point. I think there is something wrong with how claims are being either recorded or reported to the various authorities. So that's definitely too low. And that's something maybe we need to look at, because there's various reasons why sometimes it does not get recorded either. I want to link physical and mental well-being. Now, there has a lot that has been said already. These are some studies that were done in the UK a number of years. I think this went back to 2010, 2012 period, where it was found that about 30% of all people that have a long-term physical problem were also having mental problems, and vice versa. People that were having a mental issue were found to be easily having a physical issue. And I think this is really important, and maybe it is stating the obvious, I know, certainly usually to the people that are in an audience like this. But it is linked to each other. If you are not physically well, how can you be mentally well? If you're not mentally well, how can you be properly physically well? So that importance needs to be needs to be emphasized to the seafarer. But that also links up to the safety of the ship. And that brings in the social aspect that earlier we talked about already. We talked about the isolation of seafarers in their cabins, and they go, well, they don't isolate themselves as such because they are social with their family or with their social media apps, but they isolate themselves from the rest of their colleagues on board. And if you don't know your colleagues on board, if you don't have a close social relation with somebody, you're not going to look after them. You're not going to wonder, is there something wrong? Are you scribbling something on your walls? Are you making little crossbows out of pens? You don't notice these things if you don't care for your fellow colleagues. So that whole aspect brings everything together. You have the physical side, you have the mental side, you have the social well-being side, which ultimately leads to improving the safety of the operations on board of the ships. Astonishing rates of seafarer suicide. But then again, the question there goes to, do we actually know the real rates of seafarer suicides? Because certainly from a PNI perspective, it does not always get recorded as such in our claim systems. Quite often, we will have a person that is missing at sea. Whether or not it is a suicide, it's difficult. You can't ask the person. But it does usually not get recorded properly, or it does get underreported. So I think this is, and even the IMO has recognized as well, seafarer suicides are amongst the highest profession that where you find suicides. So there is definitely a problem there with mental well-being. We all know that. again, I'm coming back to those statistics that there's a very small number, and I think for certain we can say that that is underreported. There is an issue there. In quite a number of the mental illness cases that we saw in the club, suicide or an attempted suicide was part of it. Now, there's a few things that I wanted to go through, a few of the points that we saw, and this touches back on what earlier was said. There are a lot of helplines available, and a lot of operators have put a helpline in place from the company as well. But when we had discussions with ship owners, with seafarers, we found these do not work. I'm not talking about the international ones. I'm talking about the ones that are operated by individual ship owners. We found that there is a reluctance from the seafarer to use a helpline that is operated by their own employer. For various obvious reasons, you don't want to tell your employer that you're having a problem. Why? That is the bigger question, which needs to be looked into, and which we need to, and I'm going to come back on that one later. We found also that the use of the people on those helplines is not always the right type of person that is operating these helplines. And I think this is where helplines such as these ones or other international organizations that are operating these, those are much more useful. They are trained people. They have either had received training, or they are psychiatrists themselves that can provide that correct level of support to whoever is using the helpline. But even then we see quite often these helplines get called for the wrong reasons, because they get called for salary issues, they get called for contract issues, which is not necessarily the purpose of that helpline. I get quite often a question that, can we screen for mental illness before, like part of the PME program? Can we do additional tests? Of course you can do so. Whether or not it actually is going to tell you something, I question that. I can see quite a number of people agreeing there. And there was a study that was done in the UK as well, though this was with the Army. And if you want to pass an exam like that, it's quite easy. If you know more or less how you need to answer the questions, you're never going to find a mental illness at the stage of a PME. You will always be able to avoid or answer these questions such that you can pass the exam. So that is not something that we would recommend anybody implementing as part of their PME. Now, this is something that I first started talking about back in 2018 in our Wellbeing publication. At that time, I mentioned that we really need to look into implementing a person on board that can deal with this. And yes, I did love that picture about the various hats earlier. And that is a problem. There is way too many job scopes and responsibilities on board, but yeah, I'll add one more. And I really think it is important that we have something like a mental champion on board. Somebody who has received some kind of training to be able to recognize these issues, to be able to provide first aid, mental first aid. And then it can get escalated to a professional ashore. This is definitely not the idea that this person needs to be able to solve the problem, but at least there is first aid available. And I'm part of the SDCW review in Singapore as well. And I know that I saw a proposal, I forgot by who it was, to the IMO, that they now in SDCW want to include mental first aid as a mandatory training, which I think is really fantastic. If now we are going to tell all the seafarers that these are the issues and this is what you can do, great. Still, I think having a champion on board, and this can get combined with social aspect. It's not just about the mental health aspect. It is also about getting these things, social activities organized on board. Which exactly brings us back to this. If only the master had done what they are supposed to be doing, which is doing cabin checks on a regular basis, this could have been stopped. If only there was a person on board that this seafarer could have gone to and could have had a discussion with, at least these things could have been prevented. Which then brings us to this, of course, and this was discussed earlier already. And by no means am I going to say that we have to switch off Starlink or Fleet. Definitely not. I think we would have a revolution if we try and do that. But I think what we there need to do is we need to raise the awareness. We need to try and educate the seafarer. And I've had, when I said this previously at other panel discussions, I get the question, would you regulate how social media can be used for anybody on the shore side? No, you wouldn't. Is anybody going to tell me how many hours I can spend on my phone in the evening? No, it's my own problem. If I keep watching YouTube all the way until 1 o'clock and I'm too tired to come into work the next day, nobody is regulating us on the shore side. So why should we regulate the seafarer on board? Shouldn't they do themselves? Shouldn't they be capable? They're adults. We've selected them. We like them. We put them in charge of multi-million-dollar assets. Why should we regulate when and how much they can use their social media? I think it really is important that we recognize that seafarers need to have that access to their family. I also think at the same time, we need to raise that awareness that we need a social engagement on board, exactly for the reasons that I said at the beginning. So I think there is something, and you mentioned earlier about the alcohol, and I'm with you there. I really think we should allow alcohol on board. When I was at sea, we never had any regulations. We never prohibited it. I was on gas tankers, we had alcohol, and we never had problems with it. It's the same thing as with the social media. It can be self-regulated on board. But is that what seafarers want now? That's what we like. That's our generation. So important there as well is, what is it that the current generation of seafarers want as something that they can socialize? They may not be interested in having a glass of beer or wine. They are interested in their TikToks and in their Facebooks. No, sorry, Facebook is out. What are the new things? TikTok or whatever. That's what they are interested in. So how can we try and get that aspect, and how can we allow them, but still have that social aspect on board? So just to summarize the various things there, I've linked physical, mental, social well-being to the safety of the ship. I think that is an important aspect that we need to push down to the ships as well. There's a lot of people that are looking into this. Everybody knows about the holistic part of it, yes, but we need to educate the seafarer that they need to do something about this themselves. We can't always tell them what to do. I want to leave you with a question, which maybe later in the panel we can come back to. Would you re-employ a seafarer that has been declared fit after having had a mental illness on board of one of your ships? This is good. A discussion that is not an easy one. This is a real question. We've had this with one of our ship owners. They had, I believe it was a chief engineer who had a mental episode on board, who was declared unfit, was ashore for, I think, up to a year, before then finally the doctors declared him to have recovered from that mental illness. And he went back to his company and said, knock, knock, I'm ready to sail. There's a lot there. Let's think about it, or think about alternative options or solutions, and we can have a chat about it later. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Melbourne, for that. And you have given us enough food for thought, so thought we'll have a quick break for the refreshments before we hand over to the final speaker. So 10-minute break. Thank you.
11:30 we can. This stuff is very. Online session. Get us started. Just keep it. Yeah, we are having a break for 15 minutes.
Thanking the organizers for the wonderful refreshments. Thank you. So moving on to talk about practical solutions, we have our next speaker, who is the founder of 3Cube Medicare and an innovative entrepreneur with a decade of experience in the healthcare sector and over 8 years of expertise in delivering tailored healthcare solutions for the maritime industry. He holds a master's in biomedical engineering and a strong family legacy in the maritime industry, which provided a solid foundation for him. His vision has been or is to enhance remote medical services with a 360-degree approach. 3Cube is a leading provider of remote medical assistance, supports over 1,700 vessels, offering comprehensive services such as the 24/7 medical support, wellness, sick bay management, and specialized training for seafarers. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Mr. Ravjot Kumar for his presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Now that we have got some fuel in us, I think this topic, the more we go on talking about it, the deeper it becomes. And it's amazing how every perspective is new, is different, and just as correct as the previous one. And there's no one solution for it. And, you know, while having a tea, there was somebody who said the mind is very fascinating. You know, there's so many different things. And I said, the challenge is there's nothing wrong. There's almost everything that is correct. It's just maybe sometimes the environment, the situation, or the eventual impact of what goes on in the mind that actually makes it whether it was right or was it wrong. So let's start with a very important question. What is that one entity that all of us have had the most conversation with? Almost all the time. What's that one entity? Anyone would like to take a guess? The mind. You know, whether it's you sitting there, even me, while trying to talk, there's something going on. Should I ask this question? Should I not ask this question? What will happen from it? The mind is like this open highway where there's thoughts flowing in all the time. If we try to stop them or we regulate them, we all know what regulations do. They don't necessarily solve the problem. They start loading up and piling up issues one place or the other. So what is it that we should tell everyone? Have an open mind. You know, that's the most thing we tell everybody who's either trying to cope with issues or even generally when they're transitioning from maybe ship to shore, have an open mind. See where it leads you. And that is something that we've been thinking about very closely when we started thinking of solutions that we can put forth. We know there's a challenge. The statistics give us some insights, but we know there's more to the statistics. People don't come out with it. So when we sat and we said, okay, what is different? Let's go back to the drawing board and let's see what we can do and how we can start the conversation at a more, at a much earlier level than when there's a problem. And it got us back to when we were kids. You know, we was round table, I was sitting with doctors, psychologists, and we were saying, okay, what can we do? We said, you know, when we are young, we are driven by the mind. So the mind is something that takes us forward because we want to learn. It's the curiosity. So we want to play with different things. We learn about sharp edges. We learn about hot and cold, all through experience. The mind is teaching us a lot of things. As we become older, the knowledge and the experience makes us take some decisions based on what we've learned. But the mind is still fueling us forward. That is why in schools you have various subjects. Learn about everything. Don't just learn about one thing. And then when we grow up, we start specializing. And as we start doing that, we start focusing on one thing. But there's something that goes missing as we grow older. Our vision becomes more myopic. We start focusing on only one thing. We start losing out on our hobbies. We start losing out on different things. If you're reading or focusing on something, it's only on one thing. So as a child, the curiosity of the mind, the thing that was pushing us forward, slowly started becoming more or less stagnant or just good in one particular area. Most of us at a particular age, when we asked to do something apart from work, we'll just stare at the wall because we can't find our hobbies. Or at best nowadays, switch on Netflix, right? That's the only thing. But is that healthy enough rather than the curiosity of let's learn something new, whether it's a new language, whether it's, I want to learn art. I used to like art. I like writing. Or is it, even generating really cool AI images? Because I know searching those keywords, if you ever realize the best Google searches only come if you put a good keyword. And that is an industry by itself. There are companies who charge you just to give you the right keyword to put in. So there's so many things that the mind should be trained and should learn from a continuous process, right? And we tend to forget that. And even today, when we were talking of various things, we spoke about things from an organizational perspective. We spoke about statistics coming in, what's being classified. But we are not talking of we're talking of the pressures that they have, but what all are we training them from an aspect for the mind to become more resilient? And then we started looking at these surveys called the Happiness Survey Index. And of course, the happiness, not all is gloom. The statistics are not all that bad. But when we look at it, happiness is also defined as how is your environment treating you? It's more like, are you happy with the meals? Are you happy with the rest you're getting? Are you happy with resources, et cetera, et cetera? And we said, again, we're making the environment, we're testing more, is the environment good? But what about ourselves? Are we prepared? Have we come to a stage and we said, okay, we want to change happiness to satisfaction? Because there's a very big difference between happiness and satisfaction, though it may look alike. And the biggest example is COVID. First of all, our heroes at sea. That was the trending slogan that went during COVID. Our heroes at sea, keeping the world moving. You ask any seafarer or any one of you, or you all would have known it. That was perhaps the most stressful time. Happiness was not an option for those on board. Even for those ashore trying to manage the people on board. Happiness is not an option. But if you ask anyone today, are you satisfied with what you achieved during that period? Or your actions leading to the world actually moving and the vaccines reaching places or food reaching places? And you'll find a small smile on their faces. Yes, we went through that. It was not a happy time, but I'm satisfied I was part of it. I was part of that challenging moment. And so if we want to really look at it, that when we talk about mental wellness and well-being, physical is an equal part. That the statistic that you mentioned, that we cannot segregate the physical well-being from mental, it's true, because most of those cases that sign off that are not classified as mental wellness have psychosomatic symptoms, which means people are not improving despite all the measures that are given. Of course, we leave that topic for another time. But what's really important is trying to find out how what are we doing within ourselves to equip ourselves to get better, mentally more resilient. And so we ran a satisfaction survey. Just when we ran this survey, we took a few keywords, and the idea was, are we going to get a number of responses from people? Of course, it's an anonymous survey. It turns out we have, as of 7 days, we had 2,000 responses, out of which 97% were from seafarers on board. And it's not moving ahead. Okay, I've managed it. And what that really did was give us a view of how we are coping with our issues. We know there are issues. We can't let the environment be different. That's something that is just not going to happen. And we saw, of course, the age distribution. It was great to see that we had a good population range everywhere. And though these scores look good, it's important to keep in mind that a score less than 9, only 9 and above is a promoter, which means they're in good place. A 7 and 8 are people who are on the fence. And less than 6 is where really you need to do something about it. And what was interesting, if I link it with one of the previous presentations, is you look at locus of control. which is the only one in 5.5. And that relates really well when we spoke about it. You have these inspections, you have all these things happening on port. You're not part of the planning when anything is taking place, and people on board feel that they have less control about whatever is happening. And when you have something like that with when you look at resilience, which is not beyond 9, that's when you start correlating and saying, okay, these things could have an impact on a person's mental well-being. Because what that happens is you don't blame yourself. You say, it's not in my control. I'm not resilient enough to be able to take the right steps or take whatever steps, because nobody will really listen. And as a result, you just get stressed and overworked till a point where there's either burnout or the tipping point, as they call it. So what's really important is when we study these statistics, is, of course, that the 3 points that we wanted to focus on. One is the locus of control, a lot of which we cannot. But I think a very good insight coming out from the previous presentation when Girish had given was involving the people on board with the decisions being taken. I think that was also a conversation I had earlier before the meeting started. Getting them involved, make them at least, if not a key decision maker, make them a voice which is at least discussed at that stage. And I think that will change this perception in a big way. The other one was the work-life balance. Now, of course, when you're on board, you really can't get that ideal work-life balance. But connectivity is increasing. Connectivity has made us not only to communicate with family members, I'd say connectivity to learn new things. We've talked about how connectivity is changing the face of training on board, which I think is really good, because when you train someone in their environment, the results are a lot more than being trained in a simulated environment, just because you can apply that knowledge there. So that's been our example when we've given trainings. And of course, the last is resilience. Now, resilience is something which doesn't just happen in split. You can do all the trainings. Resilience is a combination of your knowledge, your speed of acting, how open-minded you are, and how you're prepared to take on any particular challenge, or even for that matter, something is unavoidable that comes in your way, and what steps you need to take. They may not be the more classic steps. They may be something innovative. They may be something which is out of the box, but you need to follow it through. I think there was in one presentation said in the first presentation, can I show up to work and still make a mistake, right? And a lot of that, if that support comes in, that, well, maybe you will not land up making a mistake. You can show up to work, you can discuss it with us, and we'll take the best decision as a team. So the mind is basically how you frame it to be. You start having positive talks with it, we'll all start looking at things more vibrantly. For example, just the very next slide. When I showed this slide to somebody, they said, oh, great, 67% people feel they are completely satisfied. So what's the problem? Right? They look at it at the brighter side, which is great. That's what we should be looking at. But then I said, don't you think that the 25% who are on the fence, we need to get them more to this side? And those who are dissatisfied, we really need to work on them, because those are the ones that may land up scribbling on the wall, that may land up, doing something which should become more drastic. We talk about rising number of suicides. We talk about rising number of mental health issues. But you still, when we look at it from a percentage perspective, they're still very small. They will be, because not all is dark. It's just that before it gets darker, before we don't have control on the situation, it's important we start taking steps. And that requires, another stat that we got, we saw the clarity in decision-making from being from being satisfied, somewhat satisfied, and dissatisfied, become more clearer with age. And that is why if you see this graph of very dissatisfied, you'll see a large number of them which are in the later, that means from 49 to 58 plus. It's also important to realize this is when we become so focused in what we're doing, we stop letting the mind explore and we just go in one direction. Get up in the morning, show up to work, go back, get up in the morning, show up to work, go back. We stop exploring. We almost suppress the childish mind in us. And if there's one thing anyone will say is always be curious. You look at anything that has been created, whether at the age of 22 or whether at the age of 60, it's because of curiosity. Any regulation that's come in has been more to do with let's prevent something from happening, but normally without taking into consideration the other potential impacts it could have. That is why when you have regulations, it's important to take all the key stakeholders. I'm repeating this again because I really like some of the previous presentations about that. So when we look at this, a single approach will not work. The reason why it will not work is because, quite frankly, if something's troubling you, there was a case where, there was a conversation where someone said some of these phone calls we get are regarding, say, for example, more HR related issues. We can't do much about it. But the response will not be, sorry, we can't do anything about it. So why don't you contact who is supposed to take care of the situation? The conversation becomes more like, okay, we can't change that. It's not in our scope. But what we can do is maybe help you with coping so that it doesn't impact your judgment, your day-to-day working, and you still can address your concerns in a more appropriate manner wherever it's required. So let's leave that out and let's just focus on how you deal with the situation. Because when anything happens to you, it's your decision how to react to it. So this is, again, a very famous quote. Whatever happens to you, you may not be able to change it, but how you react to it is completely yours. And then you can't blame, oh, I wish I had reacted differently. Well, you had the chance. So, sorry. So going with an integrated approach towards building mental resilience support involves 3 S's that we call it, which is the support, screening, and sensitization. And they need to work hand in hand. You can't have all the training in the world, but no support for them. You can't have all the support in the world, but no training or sensitization. It needs to be an integrated approach. And that's something that we believe there are a lot of initiatives all over the world. Everyone is putting in best efforts forward. And we just need to make sure how we can tie it in together so that the individual who's getting that training or who's getting that sensitization or who's getting that support knows that they have access to all these elements to get them more resilient. I use the word again. So when it comes to screening, pre-employment, medical psychometric assessments, of course, were spoken of. We have behavioral assessments in vessel handling courses and simulation. Very interesting. In simulation courses now, one of the new things that has been done is to analyze how people are reacting to simulation and then to help them, whether they were anxious, whether they created mistakes, whether the time of judgment. And this is more so lands up with having a conversation then with them that this is what happened. Which has given some really good insights when we have been doing this. Health and well-being services in terms of survey, making sure that you're screening them properly. But psychometric assessments, I'll just spend a minute more talking on that. Psychometric assessments is, for the longest time, psychometric assessment in the industry was a personality assessment, right? We were trying to gauge personality. In personalities, you will never find somebody who's got a concern. And then it went from one angle to trying to find disorders. Now, disorders also you will not necessarily always find, because anyone applying for the maritime industry, going through those courses and getting to an interview will not have classic mental health disorders, at least for a new joiner or something of that sort. But there is that gray space where people have a tendency that they might have these disorders, let's not call them disorders. There's certain traits that could come into the highlight if they are under stressful situations. And that's where psychometric assessments can be really helpful in trying to analyze the mindset, the typical mindset. So in all that, in the psychometric assessments that we've been conducting, it's not only identifying, is he fit or unfit? It's in identifying, okay, these are their traits. They would require probably these coping mechanisms to keep on board, if at all. So let's share that information with them at a preventive stage. Fortunately, most of them can reach out to us if they have concerns when they're on board as well, so that that care continues. And I think that's something that's important. The psychometric assessments should be looked at almost like doing your normal health checkup every 2 years, at least, if it can be. It doesn't mean that something's wrong with your mind. I mean, we're talking about it and we all say that, mental well-being, mental issues are major, but when it comes to doing any kind of check for it, or even a simple conversation about it at a pre-employment stage, we're almost like, no, do you think I'm crazy? I don't think so, I'm fine. So it's about deciding what we want to do in the steps that we take to make sure that those who really need the help or those who really need to be identified are done at the right stage and not left in the lurk when they are suddenly on board in the middle of something. Sensitization. Sensitization is all the trainings that we have. There are a lot of trainings that are going on. Mental health first aid is a training, which I think is also being taken very well by the crew on board. Of course, when they're on board, they have their schedules to meet, so it becomes a challenge. But those who undergo the training are very happy because it gives them highlights how to identify concerns. And that's new. That's again letting the mind learn something new. So that is something which is going on well. Gender sensitization now with more female seafarers going on board. It's not that men don't know how to deal with women when they're working with them. It's just sensitizing them when we work as a team on the ship is slightly different than when you're working on land in an office. And of course, several other training programs that are there to make sure that we are working at well-being from a holistic image. It's not just mental and, that you have to build yourself, your mind has got to get stronger. You generally need to get stronger. You need to start thinking more. You'll only know that if you're taking care of your physical health as well. And an interesting stat, the people who said they were most satisfied, there were only 2.8% of them who never checked on their well-being. So you can imagine the remaining 97.2% always or often checked on their mental well-being. And that's why that kept them satisfied in some sense. Because, it's like saying, someone says, do you want to lose weight? What's the first thing you should do? I always tell them, stand on the weighing scale every day. That's your reality check. You will start doing something subconsciously first and then consciously. Right. So it's just a simple thing. Keep reminding yourself of certain things that you want to do and eventually manifest it and it will take place. And most important is the support. Making sure that we have the support, 24/7 support in various languages if it's possible, or at least making sure that the master can be trained for the immediate support. When you have someone who has suicidal ideations or tendencies, or someone who's depressed, not showing up to work, how to deal with them, and a continued well-being program, which is sending constant flyers and awareness and in touch with the vessel. That's something that we've seen has given great results. And it's almost fostered a relationship between the vessel and us at our end, where they know they can reach out or they know they want to know something about. When the monkeypox fear was there, we had more vessels just asking us, should I be worried? I'm here in this port. What should I look out for? Or I have someone who's got some rash. Is it that monkeypox? Being able to allow them to have that dialogue and get those responses is most important. So support is, of course, key, but I think it's, not as good if you don't have screening and sensitization, like one without the other. Which brings me to the last slide. Of course, the QR code is more. I didn't want to dive into more what 3Cube is doing and our stats and things, because I thought this forum was more to discuss the issue. But if you scan the QR code, you'll get our brochure and you can get more details. But what's important is, as we go ahead, it's important to keep in mind the mind-life balance is something that we should try to strive for. If anyone says that I have the mind-life balance in complete sync, they're lying to you. It's not possible. There is no balance. I mean, anyone who tells me we should have a balance, I said it's impossible. It actually reminds me of my first physiology class, where my professor said, the day you are balanced is the day you stop breathing. Because your body is doing nothing. Your heart beats because of an imbalance. There are secretions in your brain because of imbalance. You walk because of imbalance. Otherwise, you're just standing in one place. So let's not strive for a balance, but let's try to be propelled forward by learning new things. So the mind should push us forward. Life should keep our focus. So keep learning new things is what we try to, and that's why in our wellness programs, it's not just what's happening on board. We know they're stressed with stuff on board. We send them activities, we send them flyers, we send them games to play in toolbox meetings. It may seem childish, but the kind of feedback we've got has been an eye-opener for us, which means even we on land are missing out on all these things. Either our get-together parties are with alcohol, that's why we don't miss it. That's why, we are all fine, or it's with some big football game or something or the other. But I think we need to change the perspective, build that forward. Let's all of us try ourselves and then try to put forward a mind to life as close to balance as possible. With that, thank you everyone for today.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul. That was awesome, and a lot of personal insights for me as well. While I just do a quick summary, can I request all the panelists to take your seat here? So a quick summary here, starting with Ms. Ruchi, who talked about the factors contributing to mental health. And there's an interesting concept of psychological contract. And then, of course, she discussed the parental child model and transactional analysis for the individual and leadership. And of course, the need for a holistic approach. Captain Girish touched upon the changing face of seafaring, the clash of operational demands, and suggested solutions for seafarers' well-being, and again emphasized on an integrated approach to address the needs of all the stakeholders. Captain Vanderborn on the P&I claims and crew illness, the statistics related to that, the link between physical and mental health, and of course even the factors like social media, which needs to be looked at from both sides of the coin, and the equal responsibility of the seafarer in ensuring their mental well-being. And then, of course, the final speaker, Mr. Jyoti, talked about the mental well-being, the critical success factor for sustainability for all, and the 3 years model for screening, support, and sensitization, and then what little steps all of us can take in terms of our own mental well-being. So with that, I initially open the floor back to the panelists. If you have any further comments based on what you have heard from the others, if there is anything which you want to share additional, I would passing the mic to them. Is there a mic there? Yeah. Anything which you want to add down to what has been discussed based on what you've heard from the others?
You will take the questions first.
Okay. Great. So over to the floor for any questions. I can.
Hi, my name is Melvin from Singapore, work for a Norwegian company. This year in Singapore, we held 2 seminars, which is very crew related. And I must say, the sharing from all the speakers, a little bit more factual, a little bit more realistic in terms of what they share, and really appreciate that. I just want to ask, for our customers who faces problems like that, and we hear, without mentioning names, we hear about suicides and stuff. There are so many scope for a crewing manager to perform, to attend on all this, insurance claim, police reports. How do you bundle with all the advice that you have in your speech, in your presentation? How do you recommend for a crewing manager to execute a change or program and instill this into the company crewing program? And anyone of you give your advice on that?
I'm happy to try and give a go on it. And one point I wanted to make as well, which ties in with your question. 2 points. Listen to your seafarers. Ask them what it is that they want. Act on it. Or at least explain to them why you cannot act. They ask for more salary. Of course, you can't necessarily do that. But at least you can explain to them why. What I feel is missing is, 1, nobody listens to the seafarer, which goes back to the initial thing, but what you mentioned is about the value. Am I being valued as a person on board? And people on board do not understand the reason why things are needed. People don't understand why is this procedure in place? So explaining it to them, I think those 2 points, just as an initial answer, if anybody wants to add.
Just to continue on that, I think we also need to, because whenever I attend so many events, always been shared that the youngsters, unfortunately, are having more suicidal tendencies and all. And what is that? Are we not getting the right talent out there? But I think we are missing here. The link is that we need to adapt ourselves to the younger audience whom we are recruiting. to us. We need to, the seniors on board also needs to play an extremely important role, as if they would be handling their own family member in their a youngster in their own family member who's come in. So I think that if we come with that attitude, if we bring in that kind of a culture on board, wherein the seniors handhold the youngsters and be a mentor or a guide or a friend to them, rather than do this, otherwise I'll throw you out, I'll sack you. Those kind of words, I think, if we have to remove from our discussions with the CPS when they join, I think they will be more comfortable in sharing up, in opening up, in coming out with their thoughts, respect their thoughts as well. I think both the sides needs to work together, the youngsters who are joining as well as the seniors, but I think the seniors have a major role to play. That is also something which I think that companies can look into. I'm sure they are looking into, but yeah.
And I'll just add on to that the same thing as I mentioned. It all comes down to the time available, both for the senior and being a mentor. Many seniors would want to be mentors and support the youngsters like their children, but time becomes a major constraint. And in reality, what I showed over there, so even if he wants to help, a master or chief officer is so bogged down by the documentation, the time available, and God forbid if there is an incident, every stakeholder, including the owner charter, wants an immediate time to answer besides attending to the problem. So all I'm trying to conclude is, if there is an integrated management system which gives time to the seafarers, then holistically, they will be able to address and be mentors to the youngsters. So I think it is very important to again go back onto that ISM and address how we can give more time to our seafarers. At the end of the day, they are human beings. They are no less than you and me. If I see my child is in distress and he's going to do something to him, I would go and help him. But unfortunately, because of the time constraints, sometimes I lose out on it.
From a growing perspective, and we've spoken, many times the question comes is how can it drives from the simple question everyone asks me, how do we drive value from what is being offered? What is it going to count? Because we know these issues, and you said when you have something taking place on board, what is it that we can do as a pre-check, or I would say as precursor and then post? I think one is segregating compliance from the emotional side, because compliance, the reporting that needs to be done in the time frame, we can't do away with it. That unfortunately is something, and then the more the systems become easier, or people become more aware of the systems, is going to be faster. But what is the second aspect is when you're hiring, or when the hiring process is going on, whether it's whichever rank, it is important to make them feel that they're valued by saying, we have these initiatives for you. They're not core to your work, but there are initiatives, and whatever it may be. And as simple as the going manager saying, I'm there for you. We have a welfare team in-house, or we have an added service that is there, or whatever it could be. We have these national helplines, but making sure that those things are also mentioned at the time of recruiting, so that the person says that, okay, if I get in trouble, I know I have avenues to reach out to. I guess it's a matter of that. Compliance is unfortunately, it's a global world. Every country keeps changing. We may not have control on that, but how accessible we become, or we can have the seafarers have avenues to reach out to, I think they will try to at least reduce some bit of the pressure, if not complete.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. We just rolled over to the note. Mostly all of us are here. So good afternoon. I'm Alok from Anglo East Leadership Management. So thank you so much. I think Jagmeet and everybody else. One of my issues with such attendance that I do is that at the end of it, I realize I'm the problem and I'm the solution. So it's a happy, sad situation. But actually, just a few comments and one question on mental illness and how we see it. So starting from Ruchi, what you mentioned about what happens inside the skull and how it interacts with the outside. I do feel that as an industry, we are also focusing a lot on what's wrong out there and not essentially the best practices of what's happening. And I think that is where a bit of focus needs to be, because many of these forums that we engage with, we realize there's so much of good work also that is being done, which unfortunately is not being shared with the active seafarer in the right spirit. So even from the challenges of, let's say, port planning, investigation, so there is a lot of work that happens in the organizations where we realize the problem and then we sort of hold back the request for speedy information. But I think at some point of time, we don't communicate it effectively to the master that please focus on this and leave the rest to us. So I think there is also, there's a lot of scope for training on the shore managers of how to insulate what's happening on the outside ecosystem and sort of what is being sent out on board. I feel that is a very crucial and critical one of what we are filtering with regard to the problems that we are seeing in our ecosystem. And not to sugarcoat it, but to be real about it, that ultimately the choice is on board, which I think is a part of at least our operations here in Anglo, sort of reflecting on ourselves and how we move in that direction. On the mental illness part, what we are doing at Anglo Eastern is also we recruit our own 480 cadets. Basically, it's about 650 to 700 cadets annually that we take. And what we do is we do a psychological evaluation. Because to be real, this is a tough profession out at sea, which and you can't really sort of take that up at the beginning. But this psychological assessment that is done for cadets, we try to look for these issues where we can probe a bit more. And sometimes we have had cases where we have taken help from pre-cubes or otherwise even during recruitment stages of talking to those entry-level cadets and telling them that maybe this is not the right profession for you because of this reason. So the idea is also that we need to sort of start very young at the recruitment stage and make sure that the people who are showing some signs that they are not there. Those are the comments. If I'm coming to one question with you. I was surprised to see mental illness at 3%. I can share that within Anglo Eastern, with the help of Cube and support our other partners where we have taken professional help, there have been 24 cases where we have taken seafarers off the ship because we realized that they needed more help ashore. And we would like to believe that we took them out of the harm's way. Is this something that as an industry also, let's say if we report a mental illness case from a PNI side, is more scrutiny is there with regard to registering them as claims or moving forward on that to bracket it under the mental illness case, which itself can, sometimes drive the industry to term it as something else rather than simply mental illness, which may or may not be the case until the person reaches. And so is that also from that perspective that we see 3%? Because I would like to believe that it is more than that.
And I think that's very much the reason why earlier I raised the point that it does not look correct from a numbers perspective. There's a few reasons why. Historically, and I think most PNIs will be similar, we record the main reason of the claim as the principal item. And with the majority of mental illness claims, it will not be manifested as such. It'll be manifested as self-harm, as an illness. It can be a back pain that gets put. So the claim will be classified as something else, but the underlying causation is mental related, which doesn't reflect in the statistics. We don't get more scrutiny when we record something as a mental illness, at least not from a PNI perspective. The only issue lies with suicides, where suicides usually people don't like to record it as a suicide, but that's mostly related due to personal insurance reasons and not related to our cover that we provide. So those are a couple of the reasons why the number is low.
Thanks.
I'm Shivanand. I look after the crewing of Pacific. I just want to have one quick question on suicides. You all know that mental illness, if it's not identified at the right time, or not identified at all, or not treated, finally culminates into a suicide on board. You know, that's something which is somewhat that affects the complete harmony and morale on board. So based upon the recent cases, which I think all of you have seen or heard, what would you rate as the major, say, top 3 pointers of a suicidal tendency of the seafarers on board, which the others should be able to catch? Maybe a false alarm, but if there are 3 pointers which raises an alarm, what would you rate?
So we ran one training about a year ago. We called it the CTP, that is crisis triage toolkit. It had 3 triages and when they reached out for any assistance. I mean, I'll pick up from that because that was aimed at identifying suicides. And one is a drastic change in behavior. And a drastic change in behavior doesn't mean that they're acting funnily or vague, but if someone used to be talking to talking a lot or taking their meals at the same time as everybody else, suddenly is not showing up on meals, is not enthusiastic about their food. So change in behavior. Not being alert while working. So being, dazed, a lot of thoughts in the mind. Because for you to have the thought that you want to commit suicide, just the thought means your mind is overworked as a first stage because you are not finding options of a solution. And that's why this is the final solution that, end is better than almost like hitting a reset button. So too many thoughts. And third is, so lost in thoughts, no focus. And third will be is greater sleep or no sleep at all. So the 2 ends of it. So you will find, I mean, there are other things you might pick up, which is like a person is not well kept, the coordination of their clothes are a little bit off. They are not really holding a conversation from start to end. But that is if you're still talking to somebody. But the 3 key symptoms that we say if you identify could be a false alarm is change in behavior, lack of sleep, or too much of sleep. And third is just dazed. You'll find them standing doing their work. They might be doing something which is mundane, but they will not be there in the moment. So if you ask them a question, they will take 2 minutes to give you, or give me a few seconds to give you the answer. Those would be 3 key insights. And if you see in all of that, somebody has to be observing. So that's essential. And somebody should be trained or somebody should be aware how to observe these things. And for the individual themselves, what should happen is what we normally say, because it's very interesting if you think, very interesting. It's actually dangerous when you start thinking when someone decides that they want to take suicide. There's active suicide and passive suicide. Passive is one who will never commit suicide, who will think about it. Active is who takes steps. It's when you reach that stage, someone really feels that the best solution is ending yourself. And so always to repeat, we will find a solution. We will find a solution. Don't worry. What is the worst? We may have to spend more time in fixing this problem, but it doesn't mean that thing has to come to an end. So I think that's but observing is key. So these would be the 3 key points. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything, but that's good. Yeah.
I'll just add on the basis of my experience, beside my job, also an accident investigator, and I've been involved with investigations of 2 suicide cases. And one of the major points, which was common in both of them, was not talking to anyone for a number of days, going into depression before taking that action. That was the common one. And what is important over here, that the others who noticed this were not sensitive enough to realize that something is going to go wrong. So besides this point, what I want to make about the behavior of the person, it is so important that we train people, make them sensitive, not just to realize what you as an individual undergo when you have these kind of tendencies, but for their colleagues to understand that if I see these signs in my friend, what do I need to do to support them? Because it will always be just one step, one dialogue, one statement. If made at the right time, rest assured the person will not do what he's about to do. So I think training and education is lacking. And it comes down to the same thing. If 3% is the one who are reporting, and God makes a report that in the last 5 years, there have been 400 fatalities, of which 11% have been due to suicide, then we can understand what would be the rate of people who are going through a depression and still not causing harm to themselves. 11% is a huge, huge number. So I think a lot of training is required for this. Thank you.
So there's this famous clip going on about Robin Williams and Kate Spade, who committed suicide. You would not think by the colors that Kate Spade used in all of her designs that she would actually commit suicide or even robbing Williams. So it is difficult to gauge, and training is extremely important, not just for those in leadership roles, but throughout. In my own training of SFA, I was asked to directly confront a person. Have you ever had thoughts of suicide? Have you had thoughts of doing self-harm? And when I was asked to confront the people who I thought could be on that spectrum, my own inhibition and fear of asking that question came forward. I don't want to offend. I don't want to seem like an alarmist. But it's important that through training, we learn how to ask these questions. We learn to work with our own inhibitions and fears when it comes to asking this question. Because once you ask this question, it's out in the open.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Krishna. I'm a ship manager at Pacific Basin. Rather than a question, I have a perspective because we are the ones who are going and talking to the crew most of the time. So I have a perspective which I want to share and I want to reflect upon it. Mental unwellness on board, the crew who is mentally unwell. Definitely, we are not talking about neurological reasons which only a doctor can treat. But mentally unwell can be defined a person who is somehow unhappy or dissatisfied or under stress because of the situation he's in. So if we go from micro to macro, let's take one example of a seafarer who is on board right now, but he is unhappy with the way the ship is, or his captain is, or his superintendent is, or his environment is. That is one thing which is small level of issue. The second thing is a seafarer who is on board at the time when he does not want to be on board. That is a secondary stage of being unhappy. And the third one is a seafarer who never wanted to become a seafarer and he's on board. When we go backward for the solution provider, which Alok was also saying that at the time of entry of a cadet into an institute, are we gauging him sufficiently enough that he wants to be a seafarer? If we can actually eliminate some of the risk over there, so then ultimately at a recruitment stage, we are finding a cadet who actually wanted to be a seafarer. Then comes that a seafarer who is on board but does not want to be on board at that time because there are festivities at home or there's something going on and he's not wanting to be on board at that period of time, but he is a very, very good, very able seafarer. For that, we can actually have a cooperation and coordination with the manning agencies that please do not put people when they don't want to be on board, and please take them off immediately when they show a desire to be signed off and go home. Third part comes is that, okay, he is now unhappy with the way the ship is being run. For that could be a spare part issue, the shipboard activities issues, or how the other people are dealing with him. For that, we can actually make more our captains and chief engineers and superintendents and fleet managers and our marine safety managers, we can make them more aware and more powerful to deal with the crew and to go into deep discussions with them when they find something is wrong and they are able to take quick action. I will just share you one recent example. Every ship superintendent, when we go on board, we have a meeting with the crew, and this mostly the topics are safety, risk assessments, MARPOL violations, and everything, company policies, adherence. I went one step further and I asked all of my crew to rate yourself from 1 to 10 on mental wellness and happiness. Most of the crew replied 8.5, 9. The cadet replied 11. He was too happy to be on board. Chief officer replied 1. This chief officer, the master has already told me that this chief officer is not happy, he is not working. When he said 1, I was alarmed, and then separately I talked to him. It was mostly Filipino manned ship, and chief officer was the only one from Ukraine. And I spoke to him, why did you reply 1? And he said, sir, I just lost my friend last week because there's a war going on. Later on in the evening after dinner, I spoke to the master and I explained to him what chief officer is going through. And then master and chief officer had a good meeting. They sorted out their differences. And after 15-20 days, I followed up. How is this chief officer behaving now? And the master was extremely pleased about it. So this was my perspective into it. Thank you.
Just to respond to that, as Alok mentioned, that even there is requirement for training of the shore side. If there are vessels managers like you, I think this will be sorted very soon. That's exactly what we need. This empathy as you showed towards that chief officer. That's the bottom line. So absolutely wonderful the way you dealt with it.
Yes, my name is Aluri. I work for Chalaram Shipping. Just one thought which I felt was not well addressed for mental well-being or mental illness on board is the stresses they have from the family because of the internet. One you had touched upon already, but that is also acting as an mental illness. The putting stress on the staff on board, not just because of the environment of the vessel or activities on board or relationship with the other seafarers, because of too much connectivity with the family. And during my days, we used to talk once in a month or once in 2 months whenever we are going ashore. Now we are talking every day, maybe a couple of times. So even your kid is fallen down or got a bruise or mother-in-law is unhappy with the daughter-in-law, all these things come up. So this plays on the seafarer's mind while he's working on board, and that also affects his work. So that aspect, I think it should also include in your discussions, and that's where the master chief engineer or the senior officers have an additional responsibility of man management or mental health management on board. And as he rightly said, that we should have a good training, as most of you are expressing that we need to train our senior staff to identify mental health. Thank you.
I totally agree with you, and in my longer presentations, I do include that point because it's very much an issue on board of ships. And I think quite often what the families don't realize is what kind of life that their partners are going through on board. They don't always realize that that person is in a different time zone, might be busy navigating through a difficult area or being busy with something else. So I think what is important for that is, and I know certainly a lot of companies present here, is to have family support system in place where families can know that they can go to somebody if they need help with something. Quite often the crew on board is getting bothered for, I won't call it bothered, is getting asked to explain simple things to their family at home, which is something that a family support system ashore could do. Or if something is needed by the family, they can go first to that support system. I'm not saying that people on the family side shouldn't tell the seafarer what is happening, but there is a difference between telling them every single 5 minutes what the baby's temperature is, or saying, okay, yes, the baby has had a temperature, it is now okay. The feeling on board for the seafarer is very different. I think having that family support in place, add on a bit of training for the family to explain these things, will go a long way towards helping these situations.
So I think it's very apt of you of asking this thing, and I highlighted a bit of that also in my presentation about the role of the families is extremely crucial to the seafarer's effective working on board, including his or her safety aspects as well. I'll tell you the real couple of examples how the families have shared. We have came to know. My husband is not online from the last 2 hours, and they've got panicked. And now it is unimaginable for a husband to be online 24/7. It is because there are so many time zones, there are so many things out there. I also shared a couple of days back, I think in another meeting also with some of you, about a family shared a photograph of that they are visiting hospital and they just posted it out on Insta or Facebook. And the seafarer on board got extremely panicked and he called the company, what has happened to my family, and they were not able to find out for the next 1 hour. And after that, the family responded, no, I just went for a medical checkup, don't worry. So all these things are the filtering of the messaging, what just mentioned. How do we ensure that the families are also able to understand the life of seafarers on board and how they can look into the effective communications with them? It's not that the length of the communication is important, it's the quality of the communication which is important that needs to be conveyed to the with the seafarer. It's not that everything you have to tell them on the day one or at the time of sailing. Maybe many of the things you can hold it back when the seafarer comes back. Then you can have one-to-one communications with them. So I think these are very important stuff. The role of the families are extremely important one. With the advancement of this, so much of technologies are happening. I think I could not agree with you more, and that's why we are trying our bits and pieces and to put this thing together to have the right support systems for the families. One more important aspect into all of these things is what we have learned over the last few years is the families having discontent with the companies in the case of crisis. Any crisis, whether it's a seafarer missing, unfortunate death, or for any reasons, and or whether it's a delayed sign off, or it's so many operational issues are there. The families, and when there are extended period of crisis, we have seen how the families have not been having the full trust in the companies, and it become extremely difficult then at that time that both the parties, because the companies want to obviously ensure that they want to support the families, but sometimes the families, because they are also human beings, they feel like they are not being given enough information and they lose the trust. So I think that's where I think we need to build up that also element into the families, that how the companies also do a lot of work behind the scenes. So that element of awareness among the families also needs to be there, that the role of the companies in supporting the seafarers and their families in the times of crisis as well. And that the companies always stand by, irrespective of anything. So I think that is also very necessary, because they are the ones, the companies are the ones who will be there with them throughout. And that the families also needs to understand a bit and take the support of them and work together to resolve that particular crisis. Rather than separately doing the things, it won't work out. So that's my view.
Sorry, can I get the next one? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, my name is Rishi Mehra. I am looking after training in Pacific Basin. Thanks for all your presentations and talks. There were all good takeaways. I don't have any questions, just a few comments from my side. I would like to keep it brief, and I hope I can. I feel the industry needs to do more in this subject we're talking about. There is still a deep disconnect between the office and seafarers. And I personally feel, these are just my personal comments, not much is being done. We are trying to address the muck on the surface rather than going deep down. And some of the ideas, may sound obsolete or they may make sense. It's like, I think if my company gives me a contractual job, would I really like it? No, and most of the seafarers are being offered contracts now. That's one thought. We keep talking about training, we need to train. And I realize, the best way to train someone is to give them a very good environment. Kids don't do what they're told to do. They do what they see is happening, right? And in training, what we try to do is we tell them, do this. It really doesn't work. So, the industry should look at going deeper into the issue. And just talking and PowerPoints and presentations, they don't really work. Are we looking, at our culture? When we talk about training, masters under a lot of pressure, the crew is under a lot of pressure, we agree, but I mean, this all is helpful, I would say, but are the organizations looking at the pressures they get from the agents, from the operators, from the charters, or even the ship managers, or it could be the technical officer? Are the companies looking at their own culture? Are they evaluating that? And, I really like that slide from Girish, right, where a seafarer is doing so many things. And actually, that is a fact, do this, do that, hundreds emails in a day. Everybody's asking. I think we should try to make the system simpler and easier. But right now, it is chaos. But I hope it gets better. But I do admire. I also want to comment, in this Maritime Week, I don't see any seafarers sitting in these forums, right? So the guys who can, and actually they were, I'm actually almost sure that even if they're there, they won't speak up. So that's a huge disconnect in the industry. Even if they're present in these forums, they won't speak up. So we need to introspect and reach that level where seafarers speak up. Right now, they're not even speaking up. And I think this mental wellness issue is going to get worse. So we are just on the surface, and I would request everyone to go deeper and come up with better solutions. Yeah, thank you. That's
You really true, and you reminded me of something that I want to build on to the previous discussion. When we are talking about having empathy towards the seafarer, and we were talking about the family support system, in the same way, do the people in the office actually understand what life on board of the ship is? Because we did a couple of years ago, I wanted to change the way we carry out surveys. And I split our condition survey into a ship part and a shore part. Things that could be done, could be filled in by the shore side, things that the surveyor would have to look at whilst on board of the ship. Fine, it would reduce the overall amount of time that the surveyor needs to spend on board, reducing the workload on the seafarer. In the end, what happened is that the shore side just simply sent the shore bit of the survey back to the ship, asked them to fill it in, back to the shore, and then back to me. That's one example. Then you have a ship that is leaving port. Agent updates the operation department. 5 minutes later, the operation department is calling the captain. Where's my departure report? What are my fuels? When are you arriving there? Well, the guy is still having a pilot on board. So quite often we see that the operational department, or I'm not saying the guys that have sailed, your marine side, your technical side, they have been on board, they will understand it. The operational side doesn't always. So I think that is an important aspect as well. Make sure that the shore staff understands what the seafarer life is.
Yeah. The emails which fail to understand, Captain, I haven't got the storage grant. Charters are after my life. And that's not done.
We'll take the last question and then.
Yeah, I have a question for you. I'm Jens Erik Olsen from 8 ships in Hong Kong. And we are a no ships ship owner at the moment. I have a distant past in ships personnel 50 years ago in Molamers. But if we start there, it'll be a very long question. Now, you have a lot going on relative to the wellness. I think we are really focused on the wellness side for the crews, and especially that wellness that becomes unwellness, which leads to mental issues. It's very, very common, not just on board ship. It's a worldwide common issue that mental wellness has become focus. And of course, the seafarer on board, he's in a unique position because he can be quickly very, very isolated. It's harder to be so isolated on shore. And my question is, how does meditation and mindfulness enter into your equations when you are advising your guys on board? And I'm asking this as a suggestion, as an also solution, because it's not the only solution. You can't just make a solution with that. And your initiatives for interactions are probably the most important. But mindfulness, there are a lot of apps that could be easily offered to seafarers, and they can be very useful in understanding your own mind. What's happening to me? Why do I feel like this? Why am I not very well? So meditation and mindfulness. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Thank you. So that actually is a very important point. The continued well-being on board. That's something that when we especially when we're focusing on sending articles and activities on board, there are these small activities that we would find how to get your, be more mindful about things and gauge yourself, check yourself. Everything is a part of it. And initially, I can tell you that when we first started off with it, there was always a concern that people would not be looking at it. And to be honest, I think in the first 6 months when we were sending these, we sent every fortnight. So the first 6 months we had very few feedback. People not looking to it. We started talking with some of the masters. We started calling them and saying that. And he said, all this is good, but when do I use it? So we asked him one question. We said, when's the time that you get all the crew with you or that you can have? He said, there are two places. One is I put it either on the notice board, which probably people will see or not see. Or second is when we have these toolbox meetings. I can talk about it and then, but then how do I follow up? And we said, you don't follow up, just tell them to write to us. If they want to know more about it or if they want to, have this check and they find something alarming. And I can tell you thereafter the results changed. The wellness articles are being looked a lot more. And in mindfulness, special activities that come in, feeding, music, unwinding, and tips how to unwind, having different activities, all of that was becoming part of it. And we started getting requests then from
And meditation.
and meditation. With meditation, the only thing, meditation and yoga / yoga, they normally put it as that. What we've seen is that when we talk to the younger generation, they perceive yoga and meditation to be a little bit of a disconnect with their real life. So while the masters and senior officers are very happy with it, and I think on board, yoga has become a very big thing now. They have group activities to do it. Meditation is something where if you're not really told how to do it in a particular way or have some basic training, that meditation could get you a flux of thoughts, which could be quite concerning as well. So we ran a video called is Deep Relaxation Meditation, and we sent it on board. There were clips of 1.5 minutes each by a trained yoga instructor on how you can get your mind to think of the positive thoughts. And the first thing was positive thoughts, positive thoughts, positive thoughts, and then your mind starts thinking. So it is part of it, but it's something about getting the generation on board as well and connect with it, but giving them various options. So those who like it and can do that, they have that access. Those who want to read, they have that access. I think that's that. But definitely mindfulness is a very, very important point when we're trying to keep people completely engaged and focused. Thank you for that.
Yeah, all good things come to an end. So I'm going to wind up here, and in the meantime, can I have my chairman to please take over? So they will be, they're already 6 minutes late.
Yeah, that's right. We are overshooting. First, I'll keep it very short. Thank you so much, Mr. Makkar, to organize this thought actually. And I think 4 months back, me and Ruchi were sitting down for a short meeting. It went on for 1.5 hours, talking the same topic, mental well-being. We talked a lot about
people online.
seafarers.
See you.
My more concern is the shore staff. Seafarers, we have been talking a lot, but for the shore staff, well, a lot of things has to be done by the companies. That's the company culture has to be changed. So thanks so much to this our core organization.